Hi guys, today we are going to be working on stippling practice. Okay, and so we're going to be drawing out kind of essentially like a worksheet in our sketchbook. Okay, so we're going to start off. I have my pencil, I have my sketchbook open, and I have my markers ready to go. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start off with writing. Let's do stippling practice. Okay, and then I'm going to make 6 rectangles that are kind of short. They're not super tall, but they are kind of long and like skinny essentially. So it's going to look like this here. Okay, so I'm taking up a good space on my page, but they're only maybe an inch tall, and I'm going to leave a space between those so I can label them for my stippling practice. Okay, so I have 3. Now I'm going to make sure I have the space to fit 3 more on there. So you should have 6 total. Okay, so I have 6 rectangles right here, and we are going to go ahead and get started. The first one we're going to label as dark to light. Dark to light. Okay, now we are going to essentially make a value scale. So if you remember, a value scale shows the lightness or darkness of a color. Okay, and a value scale usually shows going from one to the other. So it'll either show from dark to light or light to dark. We're going to do ours dark to light. And to start off, you can choose any color that you would like for this. Okay, I don't know if I would choose yellow just because it's a little bit harder to see for this particular one. We will use yellow later. Okay, I think I'm going to start off with this, this kind of like cloudy blue color here that I'm going to try out. Okay, now if we were shading this using pencil or colored pencil, okay, the first thing is that we would make sure that we pressed down harder on the side and it got lighter as it went over here, right? So we would use lighter pressure on the pencil, okay? We would also make sure we had a nice smooth transition, which we'll still have the smooth transitions, but we don't want to use too much pressure because markers don't work that way. So stippling is done by creating dots. Okay, so some dots like this. Okay, in order to show dark to light, only using dots, I am going to put dots closer together to show the darker areas and further apart to show the lighter areas. Okay, now I'm first going to start with the light, and I'm going to do a light value for this whole rectangle here, and I'm only using one color. Okay. So I'm going to just space these out here like this to start off with. Okay, so these are very spaced out because this is how my color would look lightly with just a couple of dots. Okay, so that's a pretty light color. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to imagine that I have I have my darker over here and my lighter over here, and I'm going to imagine kind of like fourths, right? So if I were to divide my rectangle into 4 pieces, 4 roughly equal pieces, I want to think about, okay, this is kind of the darker area. This is going to be kind of like a medium area. This is going to be lighter, and this is going to be very light. Okay, so anytime I'm adding dots, I don't want to add too many over here because I want this to be as light as possible. Just like if I were coloring it in, I would use lighter pressure over here if I was using a pencil because I want this side to be as light as possible. Okay, now I am going to go ahead and start over here in my darker area. Okay, and I'm going to put some dots really close together to make it look darker. Okay, do you guys see how this right here? And I'm just dotting, makes it look nice and dark. Let's zoom in on this a little bit for you. Okay, so I'm putting these in much closer. And when you're working with your markers, you want to make sure that you are using light pressure while you press these down. Okay, you shouldn't hear the sound that sounds like this, because that means you're pressing way too hard. One, it'll make the point of your marker get really flat. And sometimes people have had where the marker will just straight up go back inside of the plastic part and you can't really even use the color. So you want to be super careful not to do that. Okay, so I'm just dotting these in nice and light. And you see how, since they're closer together, they look darker than this section right here. Okay, so I'm going to dot this in pretty decently. And again, I'm not coloring, I'm only adding in dots. Okay, I'm also looking and focusing on the areas that seem like there's like a lot of white space in there. And I'm dotting in those specifically to kind of get rid of that white space so that it looks like it's more of the same value. Like that. Okay, now, do you see this abrupt line right here? I want to get rid of that. I want it to flow smoothly into these lighter colors over here. Okay, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start kind of spacing my dots out as I add them. Okay, so if you look here, I'm not putting my dots nearly as close together. Okay, now I'm going to keep adding some over here because I'm going to space this out because I have this whole rectangle to fill. Okay, and so I'm going to add some more over here. And you can see I'm just dotting kind of spaced out. Now we still have this line here, but we're going to go back and fix that here in just a bit. I want to bring this dotting out a little bit further, maybe about halfway or so. This is kind of the first step to having a smooth transition. Okay, now I'm roughly halfway. You guys can see that changeover. And I want to space my dots out a little bit more, but not as much as they're spaced out over here. Okay, so I'm going to start adding in a few more dots here. And because I'm spacing these dots out, it starts to look like it is slowly, like the dots are kind of slowly dispersing as they move down the line here. Okay, so I'm going to add just a couple more, like so. Okay. And then I'm going to come back here and I'm going to add just a few more dots in this section, a little closer together. So kind of in those spaces there. And I'm going to build it up a little bit more. So I'll probably work a little bit further out here just to give us a little bit more transition space. Okay, again, in this slightly lighter area, I'm spacing them out a little more. Okay, and I'm again going to add a few more over here. Like so. Do you see how they're starting to transition from the darker to the lighter area? Okay, that's how we want for our smooth transition. Now for our darker area, I'm going to add a little bit against the line. I'm just dotting in this a little bit more to make them a little more dense. Again, I'm not coloring, I'm only dotting. Just to make it a tiny bit darker. Okay, you always, whenever you're filling this in, you always want to dot because the texture will be a lot different if you just colored it in. Okay, it's very obvious on the texture. So see those little tiny bits of white kind of surrounding it? Those are helpful because they help show that texture. Okay, now I'm going to space my dots just a little further out here to help that transition. Just like so. Okay, now whenever I lift my camera up, you guys see how it has a nice dispersal from the super dense area and it just kind of spreads out here. When I do this, I always think about like almost like a gas. You know, like there's like the 3 states of matter, there's like the solid, liquid, and gas. And then in the science books, whenever you look at them, it always shows the air particles or whatever kind of looking like this, or the atoms or whatever it is. That's kind of what it reminds me of. Okay, now our next one, we are going to do red to yellow. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm essentially going to recreate this, but I'm going to shrink this down into only half of the rectangle for this one. Okay, for this one, I'm going to go ahead and kind of start off with my red here very close together like this. We're going to zoom back in here for you guys. Okay. So we're going to get in there nice and close. Okay, because I want them to be nice and dense and red over here. I want it to be very obviously red. Okay, so I'm just dotting these in here. Again, I'm putting them kind of close together so they look nice and red, kind of dark. Okay, and then I'm going to look at and find the middle of my rectangle, which is roughly right about here. So I'm going to go ahead and add in a couple of red dots just so I know that's where I need to stop. Okay, and again, I still have this half over here. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and add some dots out here. Right, because we have that light section. Now I'm going to, let's go ahead and start working on blending this out just a little bit. Okay, so I'm just adding in those dots. Just like so. Okay, and again, you can't hear my marker because I'm not just wailing away on it. You don't want to hit too hard. Be nice to your marker. They'll be nice to you, they'll last longer. Okay, so I'm kind of working through where it's transitioning from darker red to lighter red. It's almost like a pure red to a spaced out red. So it becomes lighter because there's more white space involved. Okay, it's kind of the same idea if you were mixing paint, right? You would add more white to make it lighter. Okay, so I'm kind of just working this through. If you see a couple spots on there where you're like, man, that looks a little weird, you can go back and add a couple of dots to help fix it. Okay. Okay, so I'm spacing these out much more. And do you see how I have this kind of like abrupt stop where it's like spaced out and then it's like super spaced out? I'm going to fix that by adding just a couple more dots in here. Kind of spaced out, but not as spaced out as this. And now it looks like it's the right kind of spaced out. Okay, now I'm going to take, I do want to get this little spot right here. Sorry, just the very edge was bugging me there. Okay, now I'm going to do the same thing with my yellow, and my yellow is going to stop right where my red is at. Okay, so I'm going to take my yellow, I'm going to come over here and dot super close together, just like this. Right? Okay, and then of course I'll have my super spaced out yellow over here. And you'll notice that this yellow isn't quite as spaced out, and that's usually just because the yellow is so light anyway. We'll probably end up adding a little bit more. Okay, so I am going to finish dotting in my yellow just like I did my red, and I'll be right back. All right, so I have my yellow finished. It's all nice and filled in. I have my red here. Okay, and I did make my yellow a little bit more dense just because it's so light. Okay, now what color is between red and yellow on the color wheel? Orange. Okay, so we're going to take our orange marker. Okay, and now I do want to say for this, you should be using your regular like Crayola washable markers. I do not know where mine are at because I'm filming this at home. So I'm using Sharpies. And so my Sharpie is actually going to look this color. It looks really nice in the cap, but in practice, like when it's actually on paper, it looks a lot darker. So your orange is probably going to come out more along the lines of how it should look than mine will, just because this color, because it's a Sharpie, will end up looking darker. I don't know. I think that's just kind of how Sharpies run. So I have my two colors. I'm going to find that middle section where my red and yellow are meeting. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to start off with a darker area right down this middle between these two colors. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of start basically filling in almost like a rectangular shape right in the middle where these two colors meet. Okay, so I'm putting my colors nice and close together, my dots, my orange dots. Okay, just like this. Here, and then of course I want to put my dots nice and close together just so that it definitely looks orange, right? There's never a part that doesn't look orange in this section here, right? We want this to be definitely red, definitely yellow, definitely orange. Okay, so I have this nice and dotted in. Okay, now you can decide which direction you go in. For some reason, I always tend to do this way first and then this way. It doesn't really matter. But I'm going to go ahead and dot this in here. Just like so. Okay, and then I'm going to start kind of transitioning by spacing out my dots a little bit more through here. Just like this. Okay, so again, I'm working on that kind of smooth transition so it doesn't look awkwardly or abrupt change in orange. Okay, and I'm just going to kind of start interspersing my orange dots throughout my red over here, right? This is where those colors are blending. Okay, so I'm going to add some more. I'm going to bring my orange kind of deep over here because it's slowly transitioning into that red. Make sure I have a nice blend. Okay, and I feel like that's pretty good. I'm going to add a little bit more of a density over here, I think. Okay, again, if you end up with like awkward, like random like white pockets, you can always go in and be very intentional with filling those in, right? So I have a couple that I could put dots in here for. Like so. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same thing going towards this yellow. Okay, so I'm going to have my dots kind of slowly diffusing, slowly kind of spreading apart, adding in some more white space to that. Okay, and this is stippling, guys. So all these dots. Okay, so I'm going to keep adding these in and we'll check back here in just a bit. Okay, so I have kind of slowly spread my orange out across here. If you want to go back, you can always add in more yellow dots over here and more red dots or more orange dots over here to kind of fill in these spaces a little bit more. You don't need to. But this is just kind of shows you the general transition between like red to orange, orange to yellow. Okay, and then down here, we're going to do yellow to blue. Okay, so yellow to blue is going to follow the same steps. We're going to start really densely with our yellow. We're going to space it out to halfway. We're going to do really densely with our blue right over here. So that means really close together dots. And then they're going to space out and meet in the middle. And then what color is going to go in the very middle, guys? If you said green, you would be correct. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and do that. I'll be back with you here in just a minute. Okay, so I've done my yellow to blue. I have the green in the center. It's kind of mixed between the two. Again, my green, because I'm using Sharpies, is a lot darker than your green probably is. So you probably have kind of a nicer transition between the colors. Okay, next we have blue to red. And in the very center, we're going to have purple. Okay, so again, we start with our very in the middle, our kind of dense colored core, like that, right? And then we add in a few more dots just to make it a little bit more dense because we want an area that is definitely purple. So, and again, I'm just dotting through here. Just like so, right? And then of course, once you have that, then you'll start blending it into your red and into your blue to finish this one up. Okay, and your last two rectangles, we're going to label that as one of them is going to be your choice two colors. So it's going to look kind of like this first one, except you'll have two colors on each end blending into each other without a third color in the middle. And then the very bottom one will be your choice three colors. Okay, so it'll be kind of like these up here, but you will choose your three colors to blend between. Okay, so I'm going to show. So I have these here, and then of course, once you have this, you'll kind of intersperse them. Your purple will go into your blue just like this, and then again into your red. Okay, once you finish with that, you'll take a picture of this and turn it in on Canvas. Make sure it is a good picture so I can actually see your detail on there. If you need to take multiple pictures in order to get a clear picture, that's fine. You can turn in multiple pictures. I'm okay with that. Okay, so you would smoothly transition into here, smoothly transition into here, just like we did with these right up here. Okay, and that is all for this.